happy St. Patrick's Day from East Brunswick, New Jersey. You know, St. Patrick's Day is kind of a funny holiday, and the Irish are a funny people. It's an American construction to celebrate immigrants to this country. Most of the habits and practices we have for St. Patrick's Day, the things we do, they're American. And I'm proud of that. And so I'm Maureen McVeigh-Berzok. I'm your editor of TAPinto East Brunswick and consultant on all things Route 18, redevelopment, new businesses, sports, and baking today. So I'm having my Ina Garden moment. But I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about the celebration of St. Patrick's Day, what we do and why we do it, and to make you an Irish soda bread. Now, Irish soda bread does not have Pepsi or Coke in it, okay? Irish soda bread has no other leavening than bicarbonate of soda and baking powder. So it's not a bread that requires kneading. Now, you know how people say, fake it till you make it? Well, when I was a kid, I hated Irish soda bread. It tasted like a rock to me. I never liked it. I never wanted to eat it. My mother didn't bake it particularly well, and I decided to bake it until I liked it. And I kept doing that. And I got my friends, this original recipe is from my friend's mom, who's from Ireland. Her name is Helen. And Helen's recipe is pretty good. And then I added things to it over the years. About 26 years ago, this soda bread won the East Brunswick Women's Club baking contest. And then it went on to appear in House and Garden magazine. So it's known as a tea bread. It's not a bread that rises very much. And when you see at the end, when I show you, it's not going to be even that dome shape like we get at ShopRite or in other places around town, okay, for St. Patrick's Day. So if you want to make something authentic and easy and not expensive, this is a recipe for you, okay? You need 2 bowls. One for your dry ingredients and one for your wet ingredients. And pretty much you're going to combine all the dry ones and then all the wet ones and then add them together and bake it. It is not a bread that requires kneading, okay? I bought a big expensive attachment so I could make pasta and everything from on my stand mixer. This is not one of those high intensive labor things. It's something to be enjoyed. So let's take a look. All right, we have here 3 cups of regular flour. Okay. And 2/3 of a cup of regular sugar, a teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of baking powder. Yes. And a teaspoon of baking soda. Okay, those are the first dry ingredients. So let's get those together. Now, in the past, people would use a flour sifter to get any kind of lumps out of the flour. This is the same batter that you would use to make scones. So if you want to follow this recipe and cut the recipe into triangular pieces like scones, or even bake them in muffin cups and have small scones, Irish soda bread is more actually like a biscuit than it is like a bread. All right, so some of the ingredients will go to that kind of formation. Now, okay, in here, I add 3 tablespoons of caraway seeds. Now, this is my personal preference. I think it gives a lot of flavor. Okay, I feel like Ina already. I feel like her already. Like, it gives a lot of flavor. All right, and it makes this bread kind of perk up a little bit. All right. In our house, we're Irish and Jewish, so like caraway seeds are good. We're into that. We're into that. And every year when I put out corned beef and cabbage, I put out a big bowl of pickles, some really good kosher mustard, and lots of rye bread to serve and make sandwiches with, along with the cabbage and potatoes. Okay. So here we have caraway seed. All right. And then this is something special, and this is something where you might run into a little bit of difficulty finding what you need. Okay, I use 3 kinds of raisins, 3 kinds of dried grapes, all from California. Again, this is very American thing. All right, some people make soda bread without any raisins in it at all. In Ireland, it's very common to have a breakfast that has 2 or 3 kinds of bread, and none of them are the crusty bread that we used to, like French bread or Italian bread. They're like barmbrack, which is a whole wheat bread, maybe a dark wheat bread, kind of more like a pumpernickel bread, Irish soda bread, because what they make in Ireland that's really, really delicious is dairy products. So the butter in Ireland is the bomb, okay? So you want these nice breads to feature the butter, the same way as we want like nice Italian bread to feature the olive oil in a restaurant. This is what you would want on your soda bread and the taste of it in your soda bread, okay? But, okay, so I have here a half cup of raisins, just regular ones. These are kind of dry. So if you get raisins that are, look a little kind of gray, when you take them out of the container or they've been in the cabinet for a long time, I soaked them in boiling water overnight and they plumped up and I dried them out and put some there. These are currants. Now, these are a little expensive and they're very small, okay? But I think that you might find that interesting taste. They taste like raisins, but they're a little stronger. So let's get about a half a cup of those. And this is not this is not French baking, okay, where you have to measure super precisely, because if you really like raisins, put a lot in. These are currants. And then the last ones are sultanas, which I think is kind of a fun name for something, okay? Because they're like, the kings, right? And these are yellow raisins or golden raisins. Just make sure when you put them in, because raisins sometimes stick together, you don't want a big lump of them. So when you put them in, make sure that they're not all stuck in a clump. All right. All right, now I'm using a whisk for this, and that might be helpful to you. Okay, so get all those raisins mixed throughout, all those, white ingredients that it's hard for you to see, right? It's like all my salt in one place. Make sure you have this evenly mixed. I think this bowl is older than I am, and I'm sure that you have bowls and stuff in your house that they're kind of your favorites. Well, this is kind of mine. This came with my husband from his grandmother when we got married. We're married 34 years, and this is my soda bread bowl. This bowl, however, I made last week at clay pot in Spotswood. So, when you're baking and when you're making stuff for your family, in true Irish tradition, make it with the love, because that's a taste, that's an actual flavor, but also make it the way that makes you comfortable and not nervous. I think anxiety comes out in food. All right, so I'm going to stop here with the dry ingredients. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about St. Patrick, okay? Who's St. Patrick? All right, now St. Patrick is a person from the year in the 400s, okay? In the 400s. This is known as the Dark Ages, okay, in Europe. It's at the end of the Holy Roman Empire. St. Patrick's father was a member of the Roman occupation of Britain, and we don't know 100% where he's from, but it's probably that he's from like the west coast of Britain, Wales, or Scotland. He was kidnapped by Irish traders, and those people are the Celts, as in the Boston Celtics, really the Celtics, right? Those people are the Celts. And St. Patrick was kidnapped. For a long time, St. Patrick was actually the patron saint of slaves. St. Patrick was made a slave for 6 years in the west of Ireland. Now, if you look at the map of Europe, that is as far away from the world as you can be. Because in 400, let's just say the farther you are away from Rome, that's the farther you are from civilization, right? There's no big civilization in England, there's nothing. So St. Patrick becomes but he's an educated person, a religious person, but a teenager, and he becomes a shepherd on the west coast of Ireland for 6 or 7 years. Now this is not an exact history of him, but this is kind of the stuff, I'm a journalist, and I like to know, this is what's true. Now the rest of it is kind of a story, all right? Because it's the Dark Ages. And why do we call it the Dark Ages? Well, we call it the Dark Ages because this is the time when the great, Roman education that's moving north from Italy up into Europe stops because the Vikings are coming down into Europe. So there's many, many years of conflict. And St. Patrick is living at that time. So St. Patrick in Ireland encounters the Druids, who are the indigenous religious people of Ireland. And when St. Patrick is freed from slavery, he returns and he Christianizes the Druids. And Ireland remains the only country that has been Christianized without violence. And that's an important story because you remember your story about the conquistadores and the Puritans and everybody else. St. Patrick made a good relationship with the people who had enslaved him, and they believed him as a scholar. The Druids, in their own way, were very, very scholarly people, and he approached them with arguments, and he approached them with rationality and reason, and they became Christians, okay? So one of the things we associate with Ireland and with St. Patrick is this symbol, right? This is a shamrock, and on St. Patrick's Day, it's a little thing to me, okay? But like people confuse clovers, which are four-leaf lucky symbols, and shamrocks. And one of the ways St. Patrick discussed Christianity with the Druids was to explain to them that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit were three parts of one God. And he used the shamrock to make that suggestion to them. Now, the Celts were very used to having gods with multiple personalities, believe it or not. And he used that to kind of communicate in a symbolic way. So it becomes a symbol of St. Patrick, who is always shown with the shamrock, and it becomes a symbol of Ireland because we associate that with him. He's the patron saint. Okay, patron saint means the saint that represents that country. Like St. Anthony is the patron saint of Italy. St. Joseph is the patron saint of Canada. The Blessed Mother is the patron saint of the United States. All right, so St. Patrick, this is a shamrock. The rest is about being lucky. And if you know anything about Irish history, these are not very lucky people, so I don't know how that happened. But we still have that four-leaf clover. So you'll see those, okay? When you want to say St. Patrick, you say Patrick. When you want to say St. Patrick's Day, you say St. Patrick's Day, or St. Paddy's Day with a D, or St. Pat's Day. Patty with a T, Patty, is a girl. Well, now back to our soda bread. So those were the dry ingredients. And now I am going to work on the wet ingredients, all right? So this is an unusual ingredient. I looked in a lot of stores in East Brunswick. It's not unusual, but it's not as easy to find as you think. This is buttermilk, and it's whole fat buttermilk. And this is what you would use to make biscuits. People often soak chicken for fried chicken in it. Please get the whole fat kind, because the other one is like using skim milk, which you wouldn't use skim milk for regular baking, right? I got this at ShopRite. Okay, but I also know that they have it in a lot of ethnic stores in East Brunswick, and it's there. So this is, you know, it's kind of thick, and it smells a little unusual. It does have a little bit of a sour smell, but this is used, especially in the southern part of the United States, a great deal for baking. Okay, all right, we're going to take 2 eggs, and these are very fresh eggs. My husband works in a nearby farm, so these are very fresh Jersey eggs. And we'll scramble those. And put those in. You see one was a little green there. I thought it was a duck egg, but it really wasn't. All right, we'll scramble those. Put them in the wet ingredients. Okay, add a bit of a stir. So you see, this isn't like milk, okay? It's very thick, and this will moisten the flour as well. Okay, this is, I know you don't like to use this, but give it a shot. This is Crisco in a bar shape. You need 2 tablespoons melted. And I recommend it the same way as bakers recommend Crisco in a muffin or a biscuit, because it lightens the flour. Now remember, this is something that has no yeast in it, okay? So this is 2 tablespoons of melted butter-flavored Crisco. You could use butter if you want. I never have used butter, but you could use butter, but you can't use any kind of oil. You don't want oil, that would change the taste. Okay, so getting that all stirred in. But you'll see a lot of recipes contain Irish elements, especially in the food of the American South. And once again, you know, these are the foods of people who are not going out buying lobsters and big pieces of expensive beef, all right? So we'll talk about that. All right, here we go. This is the really difficult part. You pour this into that. So. All right, so you see that's kind of a sloppy looking dough. If you're used to making noodles or pasta or making your own bread, you know that that comes together a little bit more. This is not a bread like that. It's going to be kind of shapeless when we bake it. Again, if you want to bake it in muffin cups, you know, cupcake cups, you can do that. Oops. But you know, you need to go a little slowly because this is very dry and very wet going together, so you can't mix it too much, too quickly, I mean. So we'll take a little time with that. So while we're doing that, let me tell you about why this is such an American holiday, okay? Every St. Patrick's Day, again, in the land of no money, my big reward from my parents was never to have to go to work or school on St. Patrick's Day. I have never worked or gone to school in all my years of living. And that was how I was kind of rewarded for getting some kind of decent good grades, and it was always been a personal day for me. And we go into the city to see the St. Patrick's Day Parade, which is the parade in Manhattan, right? It's 5 miles long. It lasts 4.5 hours. And it is a very boring parade consisting mostly of people walking by, since no vehicles are allowed in that parade. All right, no vehicles at all, and no strollers, nothing like that. If you're going to do it, you're going to walk it. When I was a kid, I once had the pleasure of riding in the car that painted the green line down Fifth Avenue in New York City with two guys who were very happily doing that. But at 3 o'clock in the morning in New York City, it was a lot of fun. A girlfriend of mine and I did it. So let me talk to you about these parades. The first St. Patrick's Day parade ever in the world, so not in Ireland, was in 1737 in Boston. And it was a small parade, was mostly a religious gathering. All right, but that, I wrote it down because my math is not so great. 286 years there have been St. Patrick's Day parades in the United States. 286 years. And so in 1737, now, 40 years before the Declaration of Independence, this group of Irish to-be Americans, they were not Americans yet, right? They were British citizens, as they had been in Ireland, which is what they did not want to be, march in Boston. And in 1762, we have the first St. Patrick's Day parade in New York City. And so this year will be, 261 years of the St. Patrick's Day parade in New York City, only having missed it, not even during World War II or World War I, only ever having missed it for COVID. And, you know, I was here at my house and we were waiting for Mayor de Blasio to make the decision about whether or not he was going to, you know, shut down the parade because of the pandemic, and he did, and I was very irate. But, of course, it was the right thing to do. Don't overmix this. I'm going to stop, okay, stirring it. So here's these parades, right? You know that you all watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and you saw Ferris Bueller run through the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Chicago where they dye the river green. This is a huge immigrant group, okay, and among the first immigrant groups in the United States, okay, the Irish. So these cities, New York, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, had, you know, a great Irish centers. One of the best parades ever is in Savannah, Georgia, okay, where they shut down the whole town for the day. All right, so you have this historical element, this very American element to the parade. And the one thing I think is most important that many New Jerseyans don't know is that the first St. Patrick's Day parade in New Jersey was in Morristown. You remember that painting of George Washington crossing the Delaware and all the ice? Well, that's on Christmas. He didn't give the American troops off Christmas. And they went to defeat the Hessians, German soldiers who were fighting alongside the British on Christmas Day because they had Christmas off and the Americans swooped in on them. But on St. Patrick's Day, when the American troops were in Morristown, he gave them the day off. It was the only day they had off during the American Revolution because he thought that the fight of the Irish is the fight of the Americans. So he created that special time, and Morristown today still has a big St. Patrick's Day parade, and it's one of many. There'll be one in Woodbridge nearby. There'll be one in South Amboy. I just went to one in Belmar. There's one in Elizabeth. There's one in Newark. There's one in Jersey City where my family grew up. So it's a big thing to have this parade. Did they do this in Ireland? No, not until recently. Okay, not until recently, not until it became an American thing. And so many Irish Americans came to Ireland on St. Patrick's Day expecting this big to-do, and pretty much people went to church on St. Patrick's Day. Pretty much people had what they had to eat in Ireland for St. Patrick's Day. Now I'm going to put this on the baking sheet. So let's take a minute. Okay. So I just turned the bread, unbaked bread, out onto the baking sheet. This is a ironstone, but you can put on a regular baking sheet. You don't need to grease the sheet or anything else like that. Is it fantastic looking? No, it's big and lumpy and weird looking. Does it taste great? Yes. So I'm going to put it in the oven now at 325. Now you know your oven if it runs hot or cold, okay? For 50 minutes or maybe a little bit more. The way you tell that the bread is done is that you smell it and it smells fantastic, all right? But also if you tap, like many other breads, if you tap it and you hear a hollow sound, all right, that's when you'll know that the bread is through baking. So I'm going to put that in the oven now. See, I told you it wasn't hard. Okay, when we take our soda bread out of the oven, it didn't look pretty glamorous going in, and to tell you the truth, it doesn't look very glamorous coming out, but it's about taste, and it's about the kind of juicy deliciousness of those raisins and the nice bright spark that the caraway seed gives, and this kind of creamy dough. You see that it didn't rise very much? Okay, it's not supposed to, so don't think something's wrong. And test your oven to see if 50 minutes is enough. It might need a few more minutes, but this is, you can tell by tapping, as I told you before. All right, so let me show you how to correctly cut Irish soda bread. So your Irish soda bread can be big like this, or you could have divided this into two breads, baking them on two different trays, or you could have made maybe 12 or 14, little scones or muffins out of these, okay? To give it a special blessing, people in Ireland, and they do this, okay? So this isn't an American thing, but it's an Irish thing. Cut the bread in the shape of a cross. And that just gives it a little extra blessing, like hot cross buns at Easter. But it also makes this big loaf manageable to slice, right? So here we are, and we have a wedge here. Oh, look at those nails, fabulous. All right, and you see how all the goodness is incorporated throughout the bread, and this is how it's supposed to look, not much higher. All right, and take a slice. There you go. All right, and this will be good for a party. It'll be good for people. My husband always takes one to work with him. He works at a winery, and they go in and they have a little wine, a little soda bread. All right, but the idea is to celebrate those tastes, those tastes. And speaking of tastes, let's talk about some of the other foods for St. Patrick's Day. One being the most prominent, which is corned beef and cabbage. Why do the Irish eat corned beef and cabbage on St. Patrick's Day? The Irish do not eat corned beef and cabbage on St. Patrick's Day. The Irish Americans eat corned beef and cabbage on St. Patrick's Day. And remember, this is our way of celebrating immigrants. Okay, I have a big St. Patrick's Day party every year. Hardly anybody is Irish there, all right? But it's a way of celebrating all of us and the foods and tastes and smells that we bring to this country. Why do we eat corned beef and cabbage? Well, in Ireland, they would eat what they call boiled bacon, which is ham, pretty much. Or they would eat lamb stew, which they pronounce stew, okay, Irish stew. They would have stew, anything with potatoes, carrots, and beef was very expensive. And it was expensive throughout Europe, all right? And beef is an American product. So beef, if you see beef on a British menu or on an Eastern European menu, it's a costly thing. So in New York City, the Eastern Europeans, especially the Jews, would eat corned beef, which is heavily salted beef, okay, to kosherize it, to take the blood out of it, to make it a kosher thing, but also as a preservative. And it was a way of taking a cheaper cut of meat, of the beef, and offering it to people. You'll also see the same dinner of corned beef, cabbage, and potatoes. Sometimes it's called New England boiled dinner, and that's what they would have up on the, in New England and in Boston on St. Patrick's Day. But where we get our corned beef from is New York City, because everybody comes from Brooklyn. And there was a time up until very recently that 1 in every 10 Americans passed through Brooklyn. So this is, again, an Irish-American holiday. Irish-American food item. Where do we get the Irish coffee from? San Francisco. I made my husband do a foodie trip to the Buena Vista, which is a restaurant in San Francisco, which makes hundreds of Irish coffees a day, and it was just invented by a guy named Ginsberg. So it's an American thing. It's an American way of celebrating. What did the Irish actually invent? Well, the word for it in Gaelic, which is the Irish language, is viscabha, which means whiskey. Okay? The whiskey was invented by the Irish and is perhaps the greatest invention, okay, of all of them. If I had to choose between the soda bread, the corned beef, the cabbage, I don't know, but the whiskey would be right up there. So at our St. Patrick's Day celebration, we'll have soda bread, we'll have corned beef, and what they call in Ireland colcannon, which is a mix of mashed potatoes and cabbage. And we'll have lots of carrots because they look nice on the plate. They look like the green, white, and orange of St. Patrick's Day flag, of the Irish flag, but because they're delicious and they were plentiful root vegetables in Ireland, okay? So here's our Irish soda bread. I have a little butter on it, some of that delicious Irish butter that you see, the Kerrygold butter. I'm reminding you that we're coming to you from TAPinto East Brunswick, and I have a nice cup of red Irish tea here. Not black tea, but Irish tea is red. Now you have to do this on a cooking show. You have to take a bite and then look like you're having your best day. I'm having my best day. This is a very good batch, all right? And what makes the difference is that whole milk, buttermilk, all right? Please make sure you get that because otherwise it's a little lackluster in flavor. In Ireland, instead of saying cheers, we say sláinte, which means cheers and good luck to you. And I'm wishing you a very wonderful St. Patrick's Day and a very happy way to celebrate a long American tradition.